I'm a UVM student. I was talking to you before. I'm sure you noticed that. But I'm going to try to keep this civil.
Heckling, yes.
Yeah. But I'm just going to hope you respond in a way that's not so just conservative talking point and more of a conversation way. Hopefully. Maybe?
Sure.
Okay. So before there was a question about like Native American communities and treaties and stuff like that. And you were talking about how historically Native Americans have been kind of like screwed over by the US government and stuff like that. Don't you think that that history will impact how Native Americans live today and make it more difficult to succeed in America? Don't you think that would influence that?
Well, I suppose a question I'll ask back at you, we've made tremendous accommodations, such as sovereignty of Native American land, entire department of the federal government dedicated just solely to that. Do you recognize that there's been great efforts to try to accommodate that?
I recognize those efforts, but obviously they haven't worked.
So why haven't they worked?
Because it's either not enough, or the way that we're doing it is like we need to treat it more as an equity thing instead of just saying, oh, it's a culture, like instead of blaming it on people's like individual working and like change it societally and help them in a way that actually matters.
So you do know that there's universal health care at Native American reservations, right?
Yeah, but it's not very good because they don't have access to...
Because it's socialistic.
No. They have universal health care in plenty of European countries, and it works just fine. The flaws with the Native American...
So I'm curious, how did Vermont's experiment in universal health care go?
I'm not from Vermont, so I don't know these things.
I didn't hear your response. Say that again.
I'm not from Vermont, so I don't know these things. I moved here like 2 months ago.
Yeah, I still can't hear what you said. Say it one more time. You're wearing a mask. It's kind of hard. Can you say it again?
I moved here like 2 months ago. I'm not from Vermont, so I don't know these things.
Right. So Vermont tried single payer. They had to abolish it. It was a total disaster. So look, I think the best way to help Native American communities is to help all people through empowerment and education. Instead, we tried a heavy-handed government approach of intervention of the Bureau of Native American Affairs, of universal health care. And if you want to go see a socialist dystopia, go to a Native American reservation. Maybe you have. Maybe you worked on Native American reservations before. I've been to plenty. They're depressing. They're government addicted, unfortunately, in more ways than one. They're very, very corrupt. And this is something I want to ask you. Would you self-identify as a socialist? Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. Ish.
I'm not a liberal. I'm more social. I'm
okay.
Socialist and liberal are different words, and I think conservatives confuse that a lot. They're completely different things. Okay. Okay.
No, we don't. So I'm just curious, as someone who would say you're a socialist, what would be a country you think works well that's a socialist country?
There are no socialist countries right now.
There are no has there ever been a socialist country?
Truly socialist? No.
Okay. So your worldview is on something that's never existed and currently doesn't exist?
Is it a bad thing to be like pro-change?
Okay, so just so we're clear, yeah, the type of change you're advocating is horrifying. But so it's never existed, doesn't, and so I would say Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, formerly Vietnam, the Soviet Union, those are not and were not socialist countries?
The disastrous effects in those countries were directly contributed by U.S. intervention. There were multiple coups done by the CIA in those countries.
So let's take, hold on, guys, hold on. I'm just curious. And so how on earth did Fidel Castro taking over Cuba have anything to do with U.S. intervention?
There was plenty of like sanctions. Like economically, Cuba was completely cut off. There was no, they tried to assassinate him plenty of times. There were so many things.
The fact that they're communist.
Yeah. We
had what to do with that?
We didn't have anything to do with that, but after a communist regime took over, they had a...
Yeah, so let me ask you another, so first of all, Zimbabwe was not communist?
Burkina Faso, Thomas Sankara.
Say that again?
Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso. Before he was assassinated, he was actually
How about Mugabe? He wasn't a communist? How about Joseph Stalin? He wasn't a communist?
He called himself
How about Mao Zedong? He wasn't a communist?
Yeah.
Pol Pot?
plenty of terrible people have called themselves plenty of different names. North Korea,
so you get to be the
Korea
judge. Got it. Right. So I just want to make sure we complete the point. You believe in something that doesn't exist, has never existed, and even though the people that call themselves the things that you believe, you say they weren't really that, which is the most important point. Socialism is always judged against an impossible utopia, and they judge markets against a reality. And here's the truth of the matter. That markets, which you enjoy comfortably in Western society, is the most proven affluent creating machine in human history. And I would just challenge you to do one thing. Please stop believing in a utopian nightmare and start looking at things around you that are good, that are true, that are beautiful, that work, and are consistent with the natural law. You'll be a much happier person if you do that.
So speaking about USSR, former communist bloc, I lived half my life there.
Wow.
Not in the USSR, in Romania, Eastern Communist Bloc.
Yeah.
I tend to be practical for those reasons because I lived in a communist country. So one of the things that scares me about the conservative circles, I don't know if anyone notices it, they're 100% intellectual. That's it. They write books, they give tours, they speak. I see the real problem, our inability as conservatives to look at each other, to cooperate, to create our own structures, to do stuff like that.
That's a good point.
Now, I love what you do. You're the best of the best. Dinesh, I love all these people. You guys are great. We need people to talk. But my question for you is, how do we move from talking and pointing to the fire to a place where we actually have an organization we can pass a bucket, do the...
So I love the spirit of the question. You allow me to tell you about a great organization called Turning Point USA. We have real events with real action points and real students that are doing real things. That's real infrastructure. That's not just idea circulation. That's activists that are doing things that are meaningful, and these young people are evidence of that. I love the spirit of your question, though. I wouldn't say it's 100% intellectual. I'd say it's mostly intellectual. I would agree with that, because there are more and more people on the conservative side that are thinking of organizing and actually taking terrain and actually doing real things. Let me tell you why we don't do that well, because you asked that question, right? We don't do that well because our priority as conservatives is our family or our job or just our personal time, not government. Also, we tend not to be really hyper-focused on collective action. That's probably generally a good thing, right? It's kind of maybe our anti-collectivist impulse. We got to cut that out. And so the best moment of that for conservatives was in the 1980s when they united against the Soviet Union, an example you know very well. But it's not an easy thing because we now have to retrain 1 million people to now take something more seriously than they ever have in their entire life. But people want to be comfortable. They want other people to do it for them. And that's the tension point right now. That's the friction. And so I think you've identified that correctly. And we're trying to do that through an organizing standpoint every single day. But I can tell you that is not a mentality that is as widespread as it needs to be. So I completely sympathize with that. So
my name is Jackie Koda, and the question that I have for you is, could you please speak to everyone about how important it is to get local? I've been very involved in my city council meetings this past year. And there's a portion of our city council meetings and board of supervisors and school board meetings that have a public comment section prior to the meeting starting. And you can make a public comment about anything. And that gets a lot of attention. So can you kind of speak about how important that is to actually join these meetings and make a public comment about whatever it is so that your voices can be heard instead of griping about stuff on Facebook or whatever?
Totally. That's so important. And it's not being done. The #1 complaint I get from people that are in local government is they're like, the only people that care or do anything are leftists or teacher unions, and they're the ones that are really involved. And look, I want to offer some grace here. We're too busy raising families and running businesses and doing all these things. Their full-time job is like dominating government, right? That's their full-time job. But if those of you that are retired or have extra time on your hands, what a great point to go spend time on this, especially young people as well. And so I want to just say local is everything. And local politics is harder. You know why? You have to go turn to your neighbor and all of a sudden talk about politics. Where the nationalists, you can just go on Twitter and be like, blah, 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 whatever. And with local politics, you actually have to contest for these ideas against people that you know. So I want to commend you for that, and local political engagement is so incredibly important. It really, really is. Thank you.
I guess I have a simple question. Like in a family full of like conservatives, we're kind of the minority in a grand family. I just want to know how I can converse with the rest of my family being like liberal, and especially my friends as well. Without obviously causing discourse and too much hurt, I guess.
Yeah, well, never be the source of hurt. That's my first piece of advice. So don't be the one to call names or, try to disassociate from people. But I think every conservative here in this audience would agree that you lost friends, but they left you. You didn't leave them. I never support the severing of friendships over politics, but I'm also realistic. It happens all the time where people stop being friends with you because of politics. I bet every single person in this room could resonate with that. So look, this is a situation where you're going to have to balance, are you going to tell the truth when there might be a consequence to it, right? And it's also how you say it. It's also how you communicate it. Having that balance of 100% grace with 100% truth, trying to be magnanimous in how you communicate, I think is really, really important. But also, understanding that in family dynamics, you have to prioritize whether or not you want the family to kind of stay together or whether or not you want to make a political point. And I don't say this advice lightly. There's some families that should never discuss politics. And there's an argument for that. It's like they're so rigid in their beliefs, it's just going to cause a civil war. Now, some people say, you know what? I'm going to, say what I want to say. And I know personally dozens of examples of parents that don't talk to children anymore. I think that's really unhealthy. I think it's not good at all. But it's a balance. I think that everyone should know where you stand. And then the final piece of advice is go to work on the family members where there's a little bit of openness. If you believe that you're right, if we believe we're right, then start to send articles, ask questions, start to understand their points of where they think that they view the world in a certain way. Like, well, I just want to help people. Like, okay, then start to find things where all of a sudden left-wing policies are not helping people, right? And then with your friends, I mean, I kind of answered that already. Just, you're probably going to lose friends, and they'll probably continue. And also know the difference between good faith arguments and bad faith arguments. Do not waste your time in bad faith arguments. Just don't. If people are just putting their hands in their ears, saying, I don't want to hear anymore, just disengage. But if people are really curious and they're dialoguing with you, that's worth your time. But don't waste your time. And you could use your own prudence and your wisdom to navigate that.
So I was born and raised in Russia, and I saw what communism is. I used to be a communist. And when you see college students all over the country, and I've seen your videos, debating with them, how else can we convince them that communism and socialism just never works? And as much as we try on our campuses, it still seems like a lot of the professors, faculty, staff are still pushing it, although they know what's going on in Cuba, North Korea, Russia, and all over the, Eastern Europe.
So I've been wanting to do this for years, but I am now going to do this. I'm going to go raise some money from our donors to give 100 communists on campus one-way tickets to Venezuela and Cuba. Do you guys think that's a great idea? I think that's a great idea. Do you guys think you could help recruit for that? Do you know a bunch of communists? And you'll take them. I think that's a great idea. I think we should advertise it. All expense paid one-way ticket, because you shouldn't have to return. You can go to your paradise, and you could choose your country. You could choose Cuba, or you could choose Venezuela, or you could choose North Korea, and have a great time in Pyongyang. Look, what you're talking about is very important. God made us a certain way, and we are rebelling against how God designed us because we are ungrateful. It is very difficult to teach young people how bad civilization can get when they have been raised in the wealthiest, most prosperous nation ever to exist in the history of the world. The struggle in front of us is trying to teach young people why we're able to have the wealthiest, most prosperous, best civilization ever to exist. And the communists seek to destroy that, to take over this nation and to disintegrate it from within. It is not an easy thing to do. However, I am very hopeful. I'm hopeful because more and more people are seeing the introductory stages of what this looks like. They are fleeing California, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, Los Angeles are many examples of what the rest of the nation will look like if we continue down this Marxist communist path. But more and most importantly is the cultural stuff that the Marxists are pushing. The political correctness, censorship of free speech, is turning a lot of young people, and young men in particular, saying, this is what they're putting forward. And in communism, you know this, they must eliminate three things. Communists must destroy three things. They must destroy the family, they must destroy your connection to the divine, and they must destroy your ability to own private property. In America, they're succeeding in all three regards. Less and less people are getting married and having children. Less and less people are going to church. And it is harder than ever to buy a home in this country, more expensive than ever. The communist takeover of the country is well underway. We stop that by confronting them, calling them out for who they are, and educating those in the middle and those that are open-minded about our value system and our worldview.